stance on the few issues that are before our community right now. We've got some informed speakers to give some facts and why a lot of us are concerned. At the end, we're going to have a comment and question for the elected officials, so the officials get their questions answered that they've been asking about. So, from that point on, I'll let David take it over. David's here.
Actually, you know, can I go first? Sorry. We're a little confused here. My name's Kelly Codio. Greetings. Make sure you get my good side, if there is one. It's a little bigger than I'd like, but that's the way it goes. Okay, so we want to thank everyone for coming. We want to thank our panelists for coming. We want to thank for everyone from Millinocket and the surrounding areas for coming, and anybody that's got a stake in what's happening up here in the region. And the purpose of this panel is to present what is the threat to the current economy in the Maine woods. This panel represents industry, forest products, and all that entails recreation, snowmobiling, and economic impact to the region in trail access and supporting industries. So the Maine Woods Coalition is all about protecting, you know, land rights up here. So, and throughout the state of Maine. That's our website, if you want to know more about us, is mainewoodscoalition.org. And I'm on the steering committee. My name is Kelly Codio. Dave Sear is on the steering committee, and Mark Marston is also on the steering committee, and all the other information is there too. We'll also talk a minute about the rules and the format. This is a panel information presentation, and it's presented by our group. It's not a debate. Each panelist will give their presentation and points of knowledge. Then the next panelist will present. There'll be no questions as a panelist present or in between presentations, or we'll be here all night. And once the panel has completed their presentations, after it's all done, there'll be a Q&A session giving priority, as Mark said, to the questions from the elected officials first. The meeting will close at 8:15. If there are more questions, they can be sent to us via email at mainewoodscoalition@gmail.com. So that's how we're going to do it. And you know, we're really looking forward to an informative evening. So let me just give a little bio about some of the speakers here. Patrick Strauch is Executive Director of Maine Forest Products Council. Maine Forest Product Council members are landowners, loggers, truckers, paper mills, tree farmers, foresters, and lumber processors, but they also are bankers, lawyers, and insurance executives. This industry represents $8 billion with a B in Maine and more than 38,000 jobs. Bob Meyer from the Maine Snowmobile Association, he'll also be speaking. MSA is comprised of 28,000 individual members, and snowmobiling is responsible for $300 million annual dollars to the state coffers. MSA coordinates local clubs, and there are 289 around the state. There's also 2,000 business members. I forgot to put that in there. And let's see, I got Andy Young is here from Preserve Maine Traditions. He's an outdoor enthusiast. He is a big student of the Headwater study. He's going to talk about that tonight. He has researched the economic reports and the Quimby proposal and found, you know, that they don't add up. And so that's what he's going to be talking about today. So, and Dave Sear is going to lead us off first as a steering committee member, and I will hand it over to you so we don't lose any more time. Thank you very much, and thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate the introduction. I'm David Sear from the Maine Woods Coalition, part of the steering committee, and I'm here to share some information we've collected over the last 9 months. We've done a study of sorts. We hired a couple of researchers, And we've got the study 75% completed, and I'm going to share with you what we've got done to date. We're going to discuss some questions that we've collected. The main question we have is these 5 questions here. Park size expansion. Can the park Class 2 stay in Class 2 forever? We need the actual, we're looking for the actual employment number of the national park. Another question is the National Park Service a good neighbor? The biggest question of all, is the National Park Service a good corporate citizen? Do we ignore our past? In 1994, this was the 26 million acre goal of Jim St. Pierre and Northern Forest Alliance. In 1994, the 26 million acre preserve was replaced with Jim St. Pierre's 32 million acre park, which has been further downsized to 150,000 acres, now that we have gone from 26 million to 3 million, and now 150,000 acres. Why has the Northern Forest Alliance grown from 26 members in 1994 to 54 members of today? Another very important question. If indeed the 150,000 acre park cannot and will not be expanded upon without an act of Congress, why is Lucas selling this park to Greenville? Is this arrogance? Was this actually a park plan for 3.2 million acres? This is the 3rd set of maps produced by Sewell for the Maine Woods Coalition. The 1994 map shows a virgin landscape with Restore's acquisition boundary. The 2012 map shows a process called checkerboarding, where conservation groups buy easements in perpetuity. This causes 2 big problems. Now, perpetuity is forever, and perpetuity is there's no going back on. What happens in perpetuity, I met with Mark Ray, the Undersecretary of Agriculture at Hudson several years back. He was actually Undersecretary under George Bush. And we met talking about easements, and he expounded and gave us some information and said, you know, in the rest of the country, they do rental easements, they do 1 year, 5 year, 15 year, and 25 year easements, and at the very extremes, they do 50 year easements. And we told him in Maine we have easements in perpetuity. He said, are you crazy? Who knows 50 years from now what they need? Who would know in perpetuity what they need? It doesn't make sense to do that, and that was his argument for us. The other problem we're having is in checkerboarding, the easements, once you take and you ease a piece of property, you've made the land worth less than it was originally. Now that being worth less means they're paying less taxes. Now the neighbor of an easement is going to pay more taxes. And at the end of the day, the easement holders will end up, how would you say, being easement, the non-easement holders will end up being willing sellers. So at the end of the day, we'll end up with, I'm going to estimate in 10 years from now, that entire park boundary, the acquisition boundary, will be a national park without our consent, without even asking us the question. In 2000, residents filled the high school auditorium in Greenville to hear Jim St. Pierre and Mike Kellett share their plans for a national park. They had previously presented in Portland, Brunswick, and were received well. However, when they told a crowd of 285 their plans to rewild 3.2 million acres back to its pre-European civilization, pre-European settlement condition, some audience members took offense to being told they'd be moving. They got upset, got loud. Jim and Mike were surprised by this outrage. Their eyes got as big as golf balls. They canceled the meetings they had scheduled in Belfast, Bangor, and Dover, went back to regroup, and they formed a new strategy. I'm going to say that was the last time we heard the truth about the national park. Now, can anyone guarantee that a class park will remain in that class forever? That question is answered in this document called the Flag, and I hope you all have a copy of that. This 98-page document is the Bible for 3 huge government agencies: the National Park Service, the U.S. Forest Service, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. This document mandates how federal land managers act and respond to all aspects of the Clean Air Act of 1977 and the Wilderness Act. The flag purpose is for consistent and objective approach for federal land managers to evaluate air pollution in Class 1 areas. This clearly states the legal responsibilities and mandates on public lands from air pollution. Each of these laws is essentially a charter from Congress to the executive branch. In this Bible are dozens of management objectives for Class 2 areas that are often substantially the same as those used in Class 1 area management. In the executive summary, please note that most of the acronyms used in the flag are defined here. Also worth noticing is that what should be a national park is created at 75,000 acres, it would instantly be qualified as a Class 1 park. This is from the National Park Service website. Redesignation can be achieved by state or Indian governments or by recommendation of a single land manager. Class 1 areas may not be redesignated. Class 2 floor areas may not be redesignated to Class 3. From the Bible, these paragraphs restate the authority given to Indian governments to redesignate any park to Class 1. You should also notice a pattern built into this flag document illustrating that class changes never regress back to lower classifications. They always progress to higher classes. I find this announcement very troubling. Not that Roxanne Quimby was appointed to the National Parks Foundation Board, but the date. The date actually coincides with the revised edition of the flag. It leads to other questions about her integrity. Could she have been involved in the National Park Foundation for the past 5 years and also hired National Park Service retirees during that same period and not had knowledge of the ease of redesignation from Class 1 to Class 2? This comes out terrible on the PowerPoint, but it looks better in the map in your hands. The Maine Woods Coalition hired 2 researchers, and part of their assignment was park Class 1 and 2 and every aspect of it. Less than a day later, both researchers declared that no Class 2 parks exist in the lower 48 states. Before preparing this presentation, I located 2 Class 2 parks on the National Park Service website. They were Great Basin and Death Valley, both in Arizona. So, of the 55 total national parks, there are only 2 remaining Class 2 parks in the lower 48 states. This paragraph from the flag warns of an absolute ceiling on additional pollution in Class 2 areas. This leads me to believe that if no emission source exists and a national park is created here, there can never be an emission source in our future here in Millinocket and East Millinocket. This is a 4-year wind frequency table generated by NOAA in Caribou. The bell end of the represents the open end of the windsock at the Millinocket Airport and all federally recognized airports. The reason this is important is because it indicates the direction and frequency emissions will travel from the Lincoln area, from the Lincoln and Old Town Mills. Looking at the proposed Quimby Park, which is up in your top right, top center I should say, it's illustrated better in your drawing, and it's looking at the proposed Quimby Park and its proximity to these 4 possible emission sources, we can conclude that a park in this location will be adversely affected by a south wind. Because of our history here, we all know that a south wind brings rain, and that is the worst case scenario for a national park. Rain lowers the atmospheric ceiling and helps to create regional haze. Rain also deposits pollution on the floor area, air area, and in the water bodies. The flag is very clear. It mandates that federal land managers respond to pollution of this nature. And this is how they respond, with the installation of best available control technology. Now, 10 years ago, this was not a death sentence. But today, following 6 years of Obama, there are now 4,000 new pages of regulations that lead to a whole new growth industry in the manufacture of best available control technology. Next question. Are the claims of 400 to 1,000 new jobs likely or even possible? Let's do a comparison. Parallel to this proposed national park, consisting of a 75,000-acre park and an equal recreation area, there is a 202,000-acre Baxter State Park with more than 100 miles of roads, more than 200 miles of professionally built and maintained trails, 10 campgrounds, countless remote ponds. All this is policed, managed, and maintained by a staff of 23 full-time employees and a seasonal part-time staff of 40. In my opinion, claiming the creation of 400 or more jobs loses credibility. Next question. Does the National Park Service have a good neighbor policy? That answer, let me see. No, the National Park Service ended an 8 decades-long concession contract with Acadia Corp. In 2013. In 2014, Acadia Corp. Sued the National Park Service, claiming the National Park Service committed serious errors, acted arbitrarily, capriciously, and not in accordance with the law. Acadia Corp. Lost its court case to the National Park Service and the appeal that followed, and still maintains some small shops in the area. Acadia Corp. Lost a $60 million contract, 2/3 of its gross sales, and 150 seasonal employees. But the losses don't stop there. Acadia Corp. is a Maine-based corporation. The new contract was awarded to Donlin LLC, based in New Mexico. But here are the real losers in this contract. I was told by David Woodside that many, if not all, of these towns and villages sent letters to their congressional delegation begging Collins, Michaud, and King for help with the National Park Service, but no help arrived. Then there's that imaginary table where we're all going to sit down and negotiate with the National Park Service. The table does exist. It's called the Acadia Advisory Board. This 13-member board consists of 5 National Park Service employees, 5 members from the 5 towns who also elect 3 citizens at large. This would seem to be weighted in favor of the towns 8-5. Now, is the National Park Service a good corporate citizen? How does the National Park Service treat its corporate neighbors? Well, Miller Huckett found that out firsthand. When the National Park Service stepped on the Great Northern Paper Company's emissions license, projecting larger emissions with the number 11 rebuild, the National Park Service air control boundary is set in the flag at 100 kilometers because this emission source is 150 kilometers from the nearest Class 1. Mark Cohn from the Maine's Department of Environmental Protection was very surprised. When Mark Cohn was satisfied with the modifications that Great Northern had agreed to install, he prepared the modified license so Great Northern Paper could proceed with the rebuild of number 11. Before the ink was dry on the modified license, the National Park Service slammed Maine's Department of Environmental Protection with an injunction to stop the issuing of the modified license. Banks don't wait around forever, and the result of this intended intrusion by the National Park Service caused Millenaukett's dreams to cascade into the nightmares and cascade into this eventual nightmare. And as we read the news and as we live this story, we end up selling the dams, selling the hydro system to a Canadian firm, which we all know now is Brookfield. And at the end of the day, this is where we end up. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave. Did you guys, who won the toss? Okay. Bob Meyer, Maine Snowmobile Club, Maine Snowmobile Association.
Good to see everybody. Glad to be here. I hope this goes a little better than my last trip up here in February when I managed to pull all this rockets off the drive here where 67 Skidoo in the parade. So if anybody
Just don't stand in front of the speaker.
Okay. I think it's no big secret we're opposed to the park. I think the first time we passed a resolution opposing it was about 15 years ago, and since that time, if anything, based on our experiences, we're opposing the park even more. We look at what's happened in other areas, we look at what could potentially happen here, and the outlook isn't good. The poster child for snowmobile and park battles is Yellowstone National Park, where in the past 20 years, the snowmobiling community has spent over $6 million defending their rights to go snowmobiling. They've been systematically shut out of the park based on rules, usually based on litigation that was initiated by environmental groups, and this has been an ongoing thing. For those of you who go and take a look these days on the Yellowstone website, and it's too late to do it now, but back in November, they had a lottery for people to be able to get permits to ride a snowmobile in the park without hiring a park sanctioned guide. The goal of those permits, and keep in mind Yellowstone is 2.9 million acres, was to have no more than an average of 400 unguided snowmobiles in the park on a daily basis, which is probably what goes through the dooryard here on a daily basis in the wintertime, or we hope. A little better than that, Matt, we hope. And entirely driven by outside sources. So as this thing's been coming to a head, and you know, we came up here tonight, we don't have our PR guy with us because we don't have one. We don't have our consultants with us because we don't have any. But we see what's happening on the ground. And lately we've been watching what's been going on in the town, and these letters and the questions from Senator King, and asking people, and we feel like he's asking the wrong questions, or that he has everything backwards. You know, you've seen the questions. I know you've debated them at the town councils. You know, can the park be co-managed by an advisory group of locals and the Park Service? Well, no, the real question is there any other park where a local group is actually helping to manage the park? The answer, I'm guessing, is no. One question we've always asked is, how the heck are you going to get to this park? Basically, the ownership of Elliottsville Plantation has frontage on one road, up by Mattagamon. One of the things in the letter was about opening up the Stacyville Road and stuff. Well, somebody owns that. Are they going to sell it? Is the Park Service going to take it? How's that going to work out? They tend to be very intrusive. This past summer I was out, and believe it or not, I went to Yellowstone and Grand Teton. I remember Matt was kind of surprised when he found out. And I did go on vacation, but I couldn't help myself looking and seeing what was going on there, and I thought it was very interesting. One of the things they're very good at is having interpretive signs and telling how the park was developed and came into being and everything. And it was real interesting in Grand Teton, which is an absolutely beautiful place, but the original park, which was chartered back in the 1920s, was 96,000 acres. And then over the years, the Park Service said, well, this is part of a, stop me if you've heard this before, greater ecosystem, and we need to protect other areas. Grand Teton is now 310,000 acres. It's essentially the whole Jackson Valley. Here's how they do it, because they have signs up telling you how they did it, and they're proud of what they did. They'd say, this is the site of the former Bar X Ranch, and there'd be some ramshackle old house there. And it said, it was a 10,000 acre ranch. They fell on hard times when they suddenly lost their contract to provide beef to the Union Pacific Railroad. Well, the Snake River Land Company saved the day by buying them out for pennies on the dollar. And then they turned around and gave the land to the Park Service. When you go to these towns around the park, you don't see any industry, you don't see any commerce. You see trinket shops, you see overpriced motels, And most striking, when you go into restaurants and things like that, you see foreign guest workers, because it's seasonal, and they hire people, bring them in for the summer, put them up in dormitories, pay them low wages, send them home. The local people don't have jobs. So we find this all very disturbing. And from our perspective, we run 14,000, or our clubs run a 14,000-mile trail system. We have some of the best snowmobiling in the country. We rely almost entirely on the generosity of private landowners. But the one thing we always keep in mind is that nobody owns this land and manages it for snowmobiling. They're growing trees, they're farmers, they're involved in all kinds of things. We need to keep them whole. And any park regulations that would come into being, and of course, once again, this would be run out of Central Command in Washington, D.C., can hinder that seriously. And we feel that we can't let that happen. So thank you for coming. And I think I'm going to turn it over to my pal Patrick and talk about speaking of the forest products industry, and have him say a few words.
All right, this down. All right, I'll use the podium as a prop here. Can you hear me? Yep. Well, thank you very much for having me come up. My background is I'm a forester by trade, and I live in Exeter, Maine. And my wife is a teacher in the Dexter school system, and my daughter just returned from college to be the music teacher in the Dexter school system. So we're committed to that area, and we have, I think, daily about that town as well, in these rural areas. It was certainly dependent on the Dexter Shoe Company, and I don't think it has as much going for it as Millinocket in some of your troubling times. But I'm up here trying to make sure I set the record straight on some of the things that I've been hearing with regard to the debate about the national park and the kinds of things that are going on in the industry. So I thought I'd talk about the industry as a whole in Maine, and then talk about what Millinocket has going for it and some of the concerns I have that you need to think about when you think about federal ownership in the region. So that's the outline of the brief comments that I'll make. But I know you've had some consultants up here that have said, have done things and said you need to have a lot more, bigger ratio of federal public land to private land. And I think that's just not understanding the area very well. It's one of the strengths we have in this area is the ability to work and recreate on private land in a pretty open access kind of policy. And I think that's really important for this region. It's important to maintain it. And I think there are other models out there that give you that kind of opportunity going forward. But let's talk about the industry as a whole. You've had some tough news in this area. Bucksport has had some tough news. But I have to tell you that the price of wood and the availability of wood is not here. There are still going to be some mills that will probably go down this spring because they don't have enough wood in their dooryard. Now, there are a number of reasons for that, but it's kind of illustrates the health of this industry overall throughout the state of Maine. And I don't have to look too far away to see the brand new Irving sawmill up north. And in that area, we've actually got a new owner of the Masardis mill who's going to be putting capital into that facility. We've got the Ashland biomass energy plant coming online. There are signs of how this economy is going to be rocketing forward, and I want to make sure that Millinocket has the opportunity to participate in it. Wood moves throughout the state. Wood from this region is going down to the Sappi mill in the Skowhegan area, and I can tell you they've invested over $400 million in that facility in the last 5 years. So there is a tremendous amount of opportunity in this industry, and I don't want you to think I know your experience up here, but I don't want you to give up on the idea that Millinocket is going to be an important place in the future for this industry. It is now. We still have lots of wood moving around in this region, and we think it's important to keep all those options open. So you need to do that kind of analysis to figure out if this is important to Millinocket. And a lot of my job is convincing people to invest in Maine. It's why I'm down in Augusta, so I thank you for giving me an excuse to get out of the Augusta today. But it's why I'm down there trying to make sure that taxes aren't too high for this industry, that you know, energy costs are being looked at carefully. And I think that's an important part of what we need to be doing really as a state going forward. So my job really is to lower those costs and attract capital and investment in Maine. And all these communities in Maine are important in that regard. Now, if you look at some of the assets that you folks have right in this area, you're in the proximity of a region rich of natural resources. You've got a transportation system that is second to none in the world. If you, there aren't many places you can haul, you know, 200,000 pounds on the road or have 12-foot bed trucks going down the road. And I think that's an important asset that you have. You have a long-term supply of wood. We know we're managing that sustainably. We have permitted sites. Just a site these days in the world that's permitted for industrial uses is worth quite a bit and is rare. You have an experienced and trained workforce, and you got an existing business. It hasn't all disappeared. Pleasant River is down the road. The Gardner Chipping Facility, the Huber Log Merchandising Facility, all of these are seeds that you planted that can grow something much larger. And we've got a rebounding economy. So that's, I guess I'm trying to give you a pep talk in all the people that have been coming in and some of the studies that have been done saying that the industry is in decline. I know in this region you've had some tough times, but I can see a future that can bring it back in a very strong way. So why would we be concerned about a national park, and why would we ask you to think about that, and you're putting together the future of this area? And it goes back to that idea of capital. We're interested in attracting capital to Maine, and if we have the idea or the seed is planted that we're interested in building more of a federal presence in this landscape, that's of concern to people that are interested in investing capital, at least in my business. We need to have every acre that we can growing wood and being part of the working forest environment. And I know we've had a few concerns with conservation easements, but those in a way have been sort of the neutral ground. They've said, if you're concerned about development, then buy the development rights and create sort of a working forest model. On those lands, we will be growing trees and cutting wood. And I can share with you, we actually had Roxanne come and meet with my executive committee several years ago at this point. And she wanted to describe to us what she was doing, but I have people on my executive committee like Jimmy Robbins, who bought Township 34. He runs a sawmill business, long fifth-generation white pine sawmill business in Searsmont, Maine. And he had the opportunity to buy Township 34 with Nicotaus Lake on it, and he wanted to have a long-term supply of white pine for his mill. And the story goes, and he was telling this to Roxanne and the rest of us, that he paddled that water frontage, and he realized this was a pretty exquisite place, and he wanted to share it with the people of Maine. So he went forward and put that in a conservation easement, so it's available for public recreation. And I think it was a plea by Jimmy for Roxanne to think about other models that she might do if it was very important for her to leave a legacy, because that model creates a working forest environment that produces wood. But it became clear that wasn't really the vision. We tried, but I think Roxanne was set on the national park as an idea that she's had, and to her credit, she's stuck with it and hasn't wavered from it. It's just been turmoil in terms of the rest of us trying to figure out how to deal with that. So the working forest environment is what we're part of, what we think is important in this region. We're concerned about the boundaries of a national park. We can be told there'll be an ironclad contract, but we can see the envelope for the purchase of federal lands continues to grow, and I think a movement will take place that really can't be stopped by any kind of federal contract that's in place. So we're concerned about the boundaries growing. We know in terms of wood supply we have a concern, if not for the size of this park, for the expanded size of this park and the availability of wood that might be on the market. You can tell by current conditions wood is not absolutely plentiful. To be honest, we're actually importing wood from, we're a net importer of wood to meet the demands that we currently have in Maine, and that's an indication of how important every acre of land is. No matter if it's out of production for 20 years, it will grow trees, and it will contribute to the wood basket in the future. So there's some concern about shadow effect of a national park. We've had, I can point to a number of rules currently in the legislature that say, you know, within a mile of federal land, this activity is prohibited. That would be, I don't know if you're interested in a mine up in this area, but we're currently looking at mining rules, and that pops up. The Wind Power Act has actually an 8-mile range from any kind of federal land, state land, any kind of publicly perceived ownership of land. So, and we've had battles on the Allagash Wilderness Waterway too. We had a time there when some of the crossings were challenged in court, and we ultimately prevailed, but that's how history can be rewritten in some of these federal land deals, and we have to guard against that. So we're concerned about the shadow effect that can occur. We've had experiences with the Appalachian Trail, which was just a little hiking trail, and I grew up hiking on the Appalachian Trail, so I think it's an important thing, but you could see how that migrated from a voluntary trail across the landscape to a federally controlled piece of land, and then it was actually expanded to have a mile zone on each side of it, which I think began to interfere with some of the snowmobile crossing components to it, and then we began to have viewshed concerns because of that federal designation on those trails. So I'm not telling you these things can't be dealt with, but they're from the perspective of landowners and people interested in investing in Maine, it's the kind of thing that we think about. And I think Bob mentioned there are still some issues with access roads. As Roxanne came into the mix, it was clear she wasn't necessarily interested in wood transportation on those roads, so the boys had to figure out how to, and Marcia had to figure out how to reconfigure some transportation throughout the region. So I think there's concerns about entrance to the park. Have the easements or the rights really been talked about with the landowners? And I don't think in many cases there are any agreements for access into that parcel. So you're going forward putting landowners in a pretty uncomfortable position. And if a park is established, will we still be able to move trucks up and down those roads, or will we be restricted to just passenger vehicles? So those are some of the unknowns going forward that give us pause. So I know you got some challenges going forward. We're certainly interested in helping. We know we have some perspectives on the broader picture and what the future could be for this area, and we just don't want you to preclude those options going forward. So we'd be glad to continue talking and participating and contributing anything we can to that effort. So thank you very much for having me up here.
clicking right along here. Okay, our next presenter is Andy Young. He is from Preserve Maine Traditions. He is an outdoor enthusiast. He's visited Baxter and East Branch region for over 40 years. Became interested in the park issue after Quimby began shutting down lands that had previously been open when they were managed by timber corporations. Young has researched the economic reports, he's going to talk about one tonight, and Quimby's proposal, and found they just didn't add up. Had a bunch of questions about it. The three that I'm going to just introduce, and he'll talk about more. Why did the economic report use parks and regions that have no similarities to northern Maine? 2, why did the Quimby proposal call for a backcountry-style park when the Headwaters reports job creation numbers that were based on Acadia-style parks? And 3, how can the National Park Service afford another new park when it's $19 billion in the hole in maintenance and road construction? So next up is Andy Young.
Dave said this will work. We'll find out. Push the button. Nothing happened. Give us a minute. Okay, the remote itself, Dave, is that Did I pocket that, or do you have it? We'll see if this works. I'll give a little bit of background. My name's Andy Young. I grew up in the Camden area. My grandfather used to take pride in the fact he worked at the Knox Woolen Mill. Both my grandfathers did. And just for some changes in the industry at one time, I wasn't sure as a little kid how this worked, but he worked on something called endless felts that went to the paper mills. And I kept trying to figure out how they transported an endless felt as a little kid. Obviously, changes in the industry were such that, a lot of the mills down our way ended up shutting down when the advancements came in the paper industry, getting away from the paper, different types of paper production into new types. Spent a lot of time with my family in the northern part of Baxter, Mattagam, East Branch area. Fell in love with the area as a little kid. Continue the tradition today. Go to my Facebook page and you're going to find pictures of my dad, myself, and my son fishing with 3 other families do the same thing. And it's been generations of people heading up there doing stuff. I belong to a group called Preserve Maine Traditions. We're affiliated with the Maine Wood Coalition. And all we are is we advocate for sportsmen and landowners and land use issues with the state of Maine. And work with the Maine Woods Coalition on stuff. We're not a large group, but we got a bunch of rabble-rousers that somebody lies to us, we get ourselves in a dander, and we want to know why. The presentation we'll do tonight, Kelly kind of mentioned the basics of it. I'm not used to PowerPoints. I don't know how this is going to come off. If you're all falling asleep, I'll try to speed this up real quick. And actually, I'm going to try to. I'm probably going to be reading this. I didn't bring any other presentation other than this. There we go. Is this working too? Okay.
you know, you guys, your communities, you know, the select people that are here, town administrators, you guys are facing some big issues, you know, and perspective from the coast, you know, I was down to MDI just a little while ago, and pretty much the whole town's shuttered up right now. Tourism for Camden, the whole coast of Maine it's a wintertime, it's a summertime deal. In the wintertime, people are hanging on desperately. You know, an economy based just on tourism, you know, is a hard deal. Now, I came out of a family that also, my uncle had a restaurant, you know, so I worked at that as a young kid, basically earning minimum wage, not able to get ahead. So, the presentation tonight, you'll see, Dave, which one button am I supposed to push here? Up or down? Well, I'm bringing up something else.
Yep. Center button.
Center button.
Up right now.
Yeah, and I'm learning.
Right there, over the right.
I guess I should have brought my reading glasses too.
Up and down.
Oh, the ones that say up and down. I can see the arrows. I can't read the writing, and yes, I can read, but people used to joke with me when I was about 40, and I would laugh at them with their reading glasses on construction sites, and then within 5 years, I needed them too. So, let's see. One of the things we got looking at as a group when the Headwaters report came out was there were a lot of inconsistencies, and we actually farmed off some questions. The Bangor Daily, their editor, and Nick Sambides basically ignored those questions, so we began researching them ourselves. And this did not start where it was supposed to start. Huh. Okay. You know, the Headwaters Economic Report is based on peer regions. You know, you start looking at that stuff and they bear no resemblance. Roxanne's proposal in 2011, I requested a couple times from Roxanne and other people if I could have that. It wasn't forthcoming. Eventually, through a Freedom of Information Access request with the National Park Service, we received her proposal. Everybody was talking about it, but nobody really seemed to know what it was about. And with that, we looked at the economic numbers on that. And then the other part of this, you know, is the National Park Service is dead broke. How are they possibly going to create the infrastructure that's being talked about that's going to lead to job creation numbers? And those job creation numbers, there was a radio program on yesterday with Sean Faircloth, is that his name? Down in Bangor, where he was saying there'd be 400 to 1,000 jobs produced by this. I have to keep going back to which report are we talking about? Because the advocates, whether it's Cynthia Dill or some of these other people or Faircloth, keep bouncing back and forth between 400 and 1,000. And I want to remind them, the 1,000 was from the 2000 economic report for Restore. If you're not pushing the Restore, you know, report anymore, park anymore, stop claiming their job numbers. Trying to give you guys a hint on how to stay focused on one thing. But they keep using it. They keep going back to the Restore Park over and over again. As we looked at Headwaters, you know, the use of the peer regions was completely, you know, I'm used to a lot of national parks. I love national parks, gone to a lot of them. And again, looking at those, what on earth did they have to do with the Katahdin region? The job numbers were imagined, and I'll come back to that in a minute, this word imagined. And again, that's with a full build-out of a national park, some magical time down the road. Why did the report use Pecadisquis County when the park is in Penobscot County? Again, I had an email conversation with the guy, Ray Rasker, who wrote the report, and I'll come back to that. Lo and behold, he was told to include Pecadisquis County, and kind of curious questions, why? They also claimed that the park would lead to conservation protection for the region. So, from Ray Rasker, I asked him specifically, how did they predict job numbers? Ray Rasker, author of the Headwaters Report, and this is his words right here, well, we didn't do any job predictions. Keep reading. We imagined what would be possible. You know, there was no predictions in this. There was nothing. There were no, you know, and that seems to be what's being trumpeted over and over and over again are these job numbers. They're not real. They were imagined from parks, performance of the following parks. If you read that report, there's a couple parts to it. One is to look at the areas themselves, the communities, and the other to the economic output. And they claimed over and over again that the economic output of these regions was, the catalyst was the national park system there. The funny thing is, though, Acadia, if you look at Hancock County, because they were doing it as counties as a whole, they weren't looking at just the community the park is, they were looking at counties as a whole. Hancock County had the exact same growth as the rest of the state of Maine from 1980 to 2010. No difference. Badlands, another one of the peer regions for here. What they didn't tell you is that Badlands is also in the same county as Mount Rushmore, and Ellsworth Air Force Base with 7,000 employees directly contributing $300 million to the economy. Again, supposedly a peer region for job creation for the Katahdin region. Congaree, love this one. Had no idea what Congaree was, got looking at it. Next to Columbia, South Carolina. Metro area of 1 million people. Does that sound like the Katahdin region? You know, does that sound like the state of Maine? 100,000 students, you know, and it's supposed to be one of the main catalysts for the economy of the region. Great Smokies. Now, I've been on both the Great Smoky and the Blue Ridge we're going to get to. We've gone to it on trips to Florida. It's something you do as you're going up and down the coast. James Madison University also sits within that park. Shenandoah, so same thing, I said Blue Ridge, not Shenandoah. Again, you can see economic engine, you know, a lot of stuff other than the national park. And I love this one, Zion. Again, supposedly a mirror of this region. It's a crossroads that connects two interstate systems. Major U.S. airline. It's also the gateway for those 4 other national parks that you see listed there. So you begin looking at this stuff and you realize these are our peer regions that are going to lead to 400 jobs. These are the peer regions. Now these are also not natural resource parks that Roxanne claimed in 2011 she wanted to establish. These are parks like Acadia, fully built out, some of them with hotels, everything else, you know, just like everything else we've heard over the last 20 years, you know, it's, you know, half truth, half truth, half truth. I'll let you draw your own decision as to whether it's a lie. I won't say that. But, you know, you can do anything with numbers, you know, and the fact is that these parks have nothing to do with it. Now, they also listed some other national parks with, you know, the areas that are, you know, excuse me, I'm forgetting the recreation areas. But the basic job creation numbers were based off these 6 parks. Again, you know, go back to Ray's numbers. They're imagined. How? When? When are these jobs going to be here? When are they going to take place? They're based on a park of Acadia-style amenities. They're imagining 370,000 visitors coming in what, a 15 to 20 week season? What do you count in your season? Father's Day to Columbus Day, Mother's Day to Columbus Day. Doing what? What are they going to do? Because that land there right now has nothing. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Obviously, they're going to do something with it. They can't claim the current visitors to the region. You can't claim that 2,000, 3,000 people went there if all they did was go there instead of going to the North Maine woods, or did a detour out of Moosehead, or stop by on their way to Baxter. Those are people who are already spending money in the area. And why use the 2 counties? In that report, they declared Dover-Foxcroft as a gateway community. Gateway community to Stacyville? I don't quite understand. It's 80 miles away from Stacyville by road. Were the authors confused by the restore plan map? That's the only thing I can guess, was they were shown the restore map and said, hey, figure out a report. Roxanne at one time was going to have a visitor center at Monson. Maybe that's what it was. My guess is it allows them to claim for job creation and everything else that would happen over in the Moosehead region with the Plum Creek. You know, that's my guess of why they included a 2-county vision. If they're going to count a 2nd county, you think they'd have counted Aroostook, because that's closer to Stacyville than Piscataquis. The report also makes big news of spearheading the conservation efforts in the region. Again, that's kind of mind-boggling, because already the perimeter of Baxter is protected by the conservation easements that have been talked about already tonight. The only lands that aren't protected at this point are the eastern border. You know, those lands have not been protected at this point with permanent conservation easements on them. Lucas might correct me if I'm wrong on that. But all the other properties have development restrictions. Or maybe they're talking about saving us from forestry. Maybe those are the restrictions they want. Maybe that's the conservation that the report saw, was how do we keep forestry from happening. Look at her proposal itself. I don't know if any of you had a chance to actually look at her 2011 proposal. It's been put out there in a bunch of different things. I think we have some copies of it here tonight. She called for a backcountry park. She called it an FTE 25. Don't know exactly what that means. I have a guess that means how many employees. With a budget of $2.5 million. She compared it to 2 parks with minimal roads and amenities. We'll get into them. Guadalupe, which is in Texas, half hour from El Paso with a 600,000 population. That's kind of like this area, right? But it's right next to Carlsbad Caverns. I guess we can equate that to Baxter. Great Sands, 1 hour from Colorado Springs and Albuquerque, whose combined metro areas exceed 1.3 million. Again, this was in her proposal to the National Park Service in 2011. Curiously, neither of these parks appeared in the Headwater study. Now, in her proposal, she's comparing her park to these. These parks have minimal facilities. Guadalupe has 39 miles of dirt road, or 10 miles of dirt road and 1 campsite with 39 sites. Great Sands, kind of the same exact thing. This was what her vision is for the area, not an Acadia-style park. Her vision is a backcountry park. She stated it many times, to return it to a primitive nature. I'm sorry, but 375,000 visitors a year don't equal returning to some kind of a primitive landscape. The $2.5 million yearly budget. 1.6 of that comes from an endowment, only of which 50% is she going to fund. 600,000 from recreational fees. Let's all get used to it now. If you're going to fly fish, if you're going to canoe, if you're going to do anything on that land, you are now paying a yearly fee, or you're paying a per use fee to go use it. And then $300,000 from the NPS budget. Now, everything you're seeing here tonight, I've taken from them. I'm not making, none of this is being made up. This is all taken from their stuff. Roxanne says she'll fund this park with a $20 million endowment. But that $20 million endowment has a 4% return, only leading to $800,000 a year. Now that's pretty substantial, but we're going to see in a minute just how inadequate that is. This covers only 32% of the operating budget of the proposed park, non-construction. Another 32% must come from an endowment to be raised. How long will it take to raise it? What if it doesn't reach its goals? And how does the National Park Service cover the difference? You know, the National Park Service is broke. We're going to get even more of that in a minute. How on earth is it going to operate a park, let alone construct a park? The remaining 36% must come from their access fees and from the NPS base budget. According to Headwaters, we'll need to build out the park to attract visitors. They see a park that looks like those peer regions. Let's see, here we go. Again, her park only mentions operations, not construction, and that's for a natural resource park, not a full service park. You know, the NPS, we're going to get into this here pretty in depth. Estimates $40 to $50 billion to build campgrounds, sewer systems. I'm a builder by trade, I'm a construction guy. You know, talk to the state, $1 million a mile for roads, tire roads. You're going to build them to NPS specifications. $500,000 a mile if you can do dirt roads with bridges, turnouts, guardrails, everything else. You start adding in picnic tables, fire rings, campgrounds, running water. I'm sorry, if your people with the motorhomes are going to Acadia, they like to have the full service. You know, especially if you're going to get 375,000 people coming here a year. The NPS, this is a headline in the Bangor Daily News from 2012. Again, none of these are my sources. These are all everywhere else. 2012, $11.4 billion backlog. 20-year backlog in maintenance. They can't build anything right now. That was before the sequester. It's grown since then. Following this are just quotes from different places. The NPCA, it's the National Park Conservation Association. They talked just 2 years ago, 3 straight years of budget cuts. You can now make that 5 straight years of budget cuts to the National Park Service. We see this with Acadia right now, the last one put down here, keeping staff positions vacant, shortening hours, closing roads. That's what's happening just down the road at Acadia, because they can't afford to do anything. 2 years ago, they couldn't even fight a forest fire on the North Rim because they had no money. You want these people sitting next to Baxter in your forest lands? The numbers we're talking about above are just for maintenance of building and park facilities. They do not include their roads. Add on another $6 billion, $19 billion total. The NPS is in the hole right now. It cannot build roads. It cannot build facilities. It can't keep up with it. Looking at closing down up to 20 parks going into its centennial year because of unsafe conditions. This is from Jonathan Jarvis, the head of the NPS. This just came out last week from the NPCA. Visitor centers all over the country being shut down because there's no money with the National Park Service to fix them. So our question is, can we imagine this park? How can we imagine it? In her proposal, and I'll remind you that proposal was for a smaller park back in 2011. This is now a bigger park, so you can throw her $2.5 million budget out the window. I don't know what we're going to call it now, 3 million, 3.5 million. The National Park Service has no money in its base budgets, no money at all. And it certainly has no money to create a park. Now we can think all we want about this endowment. We can think all we want about what Lucas and Roxanne and everybody wishes to see with this park. But once it's a national park, we no longer have any say. They have no say. There is no community involvement in saying how the park will be run, managed, or anything done with it. So the question is, to achieve full build out, for those that remember, they're not job predictions, they're imagination numbers. How long are we looking at down the road before a park even gets off the ground? Katie is an example. Kind of wordy. This is off their website, telling what they've had to do in order to make their budgets meet. Cutting ranger programs, closing roads, opening up later. They're seeing less and less money every year. They're offering less and less programs. They're laying off staff left and right. So why would anybody donate land to the National Park Service for a park it can't afford? There's no money to create the park. What happens to the land if it's gifted to the FPF, the National Park Service, but they can't do anything with it? Remember that primitive, I think Dave mentioned it, some other people, that whole primitive image that goes back to the Northern Land Study, Restore, Roxanne? Here's some examples. What happens when the government can't staff its land? How many of you remember the picture of bear cage at Acadia and people not being able to go in? How many people remember the state troopers and the governor down at Cobscook Bay State Park trying to force their way through so campers could get into Cobscook because the road crosses Moosehorn and federal agents there were to stop the governor? Do you guys remember that? Moosehorn closed. Do not get on it. There's an interesting story. So, during the sequester that happened 2 years ago, there's an interesting article. It's on the NPCA website, and it was bemoaning the fact that this guy had a raft trip planned to go down the Colorado, and I'll liken that to the East Branch. I love canoeing the East Branch. Used to be able to canoe a whole big section of the East Branch, and now can get down to Liquor Store Landing. Can't get any further than that. Oh, it's got a new name now, but for those of you who remember the liquor store sign, it will always be known as Liquor Store Landing. But this story was about this guy. He had waited 18 years for a national park permit to do an unguided trip down the Colorado. Take that as a vision for the East Branch. How many years are you going to have to wait for an unguided trip to go down the East Branch? Losing a little bit there. Top of it says the National Park Conservation Association Second Century Commission. In 2008, Howard Baker, the U.S. Senator, I believe, from Tennessee, and a bunch of other notables, along with past National Park directors and a lot of other people, began mapping out the second century for the National Park Service, which is 2016 is the anniversary date for 1916 to 2016. In the committee, Future Shape of National Parks, there is one page in there, and I believe we have copies of it here tonight that should frighten the hell out of you. 3 recommendations, 3 paragraphs right in a row. Congress should consider creating park units that might not be immediately staffed or managed due to budget constraints. Sound familiar? Can anybody picture any imagined parks that might fit that description? Whoop, wrong button. Next paragraph. Park designations protect fragile areas even if they cannot be actively imagined till some future time. And the best one of all, the next paragraph. I'll let you guys read that. Think we've been on somebody's agenda for a while? You're going to love the next one even better. You might recognize this name. Think they've been planning something for a while? 2011 National Park Service call to action, 5-year plan heading into 2016, planning for the second century. They borrowed the name from the NPCA. Even state it uses the NPCA Commission's report as their guideline. Dave, you'll like this one. Threats have emerged beyond park boundaries and demand solutions. I love that other word in the corner. Maybe coincidence, I don't know. National Park Service is looking at creating a whole new basis of acquiring land, basically in order to preserve it. Another part of this same report, the one just before this section, talks about a return to the Leopold vision, which was a 1964 report talking about taking land back to its primitive condition. National Park Service is already doing this, and I'll give you 2 examples. Both in the same park. The National Park Service is now refusing to cut any trees at all. If you go along the shoreline or go along the mountain, going to the access into Acadia National Park, you can look down on Bar Harbor and see the boats and everything else. Got all those beautiful turnouts with the stones. Trees are all growing up now. You can't see the view. Same thing's happening over in Jordan Pond on the other side of the mountain. Trees are all growing up and you can't see the view. Because we got to return it all to its primitive nature. The reality is, no matter how many times they want to say it, that this has nothing to do with restore, this is about the seed that they've always been looking for. It's the cornerstone, the beginning. They stated eloquently when she joined the board in 2000, this will happen in pieces, this will happen slowly, they will be relentless, it will continue going on. There is no difference between this park and the Restore Park. Heck, their own Headwaters people didn't know the difference. They turned into a two-county park. Their own proponents out there, guy yesterday, Faircloth down in Bangor, he called for 1,000 jobs. Well, again, that's the 2000 report by Restore, not the current one. But they get confused which park they're talking about. And again, we come back to that pre-colonial vision, that primitive vision they want to see the land restored to. This very hall, 3 years ago, May 3rd, May 5th, 2011, George Smith sat here, told everybody he was a changed man. Well, I'll tell you what was changed. You go look at his website and see that not only does LL Bean support his website, but EPI also pays him money so he can run his blog and website. That's what made him a changed man. Let's face it, let's be real. She came in here and told everybody you can believe her. Told everybody she's not part of Restore. This plan is completely separate, has nothing to do with Restore. So there's a video on the internet. Shows the proceedings here in this same hall. And some pretty pictures that follow the end of that video. You guys all want the link to it? I'll give it to you. She sat right here and told everybody this has nothing to do with Restore. Then she paid them to produce a video of it. That's the end of the video where Roxanne tells you all she has nothing to do with Restore. Now they're called something different now. We'll go back. They're called the Maine Woods National Park Campaign, not Restore. But the campaign is funded and created and staffed by Restore, but it's something different. And these guys right here have names that are awfully familiar because they have the same titles with Restore. So you can listen to anything they want to tell you. I'm telling you right now, they're lying to you. You want to take me to court over that? You go right ahead, because we'll talk about this in court. We'll bring up every single thing that you guys, that's been said around this park. They're one and the same. The economic numbers do not make sense. It's another farce being put on everybody. This park will not happen. There's no money to create it to happen. The endowment, you know, it's going to operations. It's not even meant for construction. So who's going to construct the park? So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take about a 10-minute health break so people can get some air and use the facilities. And when we come back, we'll start with questions. Thank you very much. Okay, once again, I'd like to thank everybody that took their time to come here. I also would like to tell everyone that the people from the Maine Woods Coalition, it's a volunteer group. There is no one with the Maine Woods Coalition that's being paid to be there. We are volunteers. And we also want you to know, you're not in this alone, Millinocket. You're not getting sold down the river. We just want to support you, and if you have anything to tell us, if you want to send emails to us, you can send it to mainewoodscoalition.org. mainewoodscoalition@gmail.com. We certainly would love to be in touch with you. We also take donations because we're all volunteer, and but you're not in alone, and we're pulling with you, okay? So now we're going to open it up for questions, and we'd like to have the first questions be from those folks that are elected officials that need to talk to people that are going to ask them questions. So, anyone? Not really a question.
No.
Well,
Jimmy Biss, Millinocket Town Council. I guess one of my great concerns here, and has been right along, is the concern about we're in the process of rebuilding our industrial sites here in Millinocket, in East Millinocket. So the last thing we need to be doing right now is putting more rules, regulation, at a time when we're trying to find investment into these sites. So that's a major concern of mine, and that was brought up here tonight about the air quality and this and that. So my other concern is the Nature Conservancy. Something that wasn't brought up here tonight is the Nature Conservancy owns quite a bit of land west of the park. We know they don't have to own all the land to lock it up, but when you have the Nature Conservancy that has a history of spinning their land to the National Park Service, that's troublesome. And I feel that's what will happen if we allow this to continue and allow this park to become a national park. I don't care what size it is, it will grow. And it's part of, as was said here tonight, part of the Restore agenda. So we need to stop this. We need to stop this now before it gets out of hand. And we need to rebuild our economy. We can have both a recreational economy as well as manufacturing and industry. And that's going to be our future. We're not going to make paper anymore, but we can make forest products industry become viable again and develop other products and become successful. And we can also have our recreation, snowmobiling, ATVs, hiking, boating, camping, all that. We can have it all, but we can't have it all if we have federal government 20 miles up the road. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Questions? City officials, town officials, selectmen? Yes, sir.
I'm Mike Bedore, and I am a town councilor here in Millinocket, and I asked one question. Has anybody, including on the panel, actually seen a blueprint of this supposed park? Because that's really, the other day we had a council meeting, and we had a lot of people came and a lot of people talked on both sides. The only thing that nobody could come up with when they said they wanted to get rid of the misinformation and they wanted only facts, and I asked, where's the plan? Where's the entrance? Where's the exit? Where are the campsites? What are they going to do with the sanitation? I think those are important questions. And I think they're questions that need to be answered. I haven't seen it. I've seen topographical maps that say the area as a whole, this is what is owned by the Quimby family, or this is what is proposed for the national park. But I have seen no plan. And as I stated in the council meeting, and I fully believe this, you don't go and build your house and then go to the code enforcement officer and ask for a building permit after it's already built. It kind of defeats the purpose. And I am curious, because this is important to me. I want to know if anybody has actually seen a layout, a plan, a blueprint, a diagram, anything that would say where these things are. Because you're dangling a carrot in front of a lot of communities wondering where the park entrance is going to be, where the exit's going to be. These are legitimate questions, and they need to be answered. And it was offered to me that we are going to develop the plan. Well, you know what? Nobody has approached me in 7 years of being on the council about any type of development of a plan. Acceptance, but not development. Trust me, but didn't show me. And I just think that if you want to get rid of the misinformation, if you want to get rid of all the innuendos or the finger pointing or whatever, that you need a blueprint. And I'm asking this because I've asked this of people that were at the meeting. Now I'm asking the people that have been the presenters here, have any of you seen an actual plan design of this park?
I'll take a stab at it.
And I will give you the mic. And that's not easy for me to do to get one.
The reality is, and we're going to say this over and over and over again, we don't have a say. The National Park Service will dictate after it does its inventory of the land, what should be there, what shouldn't be there. You don't know what the NPS is going to do because you've lost all control of that property. It's now in federal hands. Don't think I'm some right-wing land. Jim and I have talked a couple times. I'm a Democrat. You know, I sit on planning boards. I do planning. I am not, you know, I'm not here with conspiracy theories, but I will tell you this much. You put it in the National Park Service hands, there is no local control. It's gone. Roxanne and Lucas can promise all these things are going to happen with the land, but as soon as it goes to federal control, there is no more say. Then the biggest question is, how does an endowment to the federal government work? There's supposed to be no appropriations to the federal government beyond what Congress controls. Now, whether they're going to set it up like a Friends of Acadia or something like that, that parcels out money, but again, it keeps going back to the Appropriations Committee of Congress with the National Park Service. No plan can come up until they're given a budget and authorized to come up with a plan. Now, I guess Lucas could pay for a plan to be done. They could build all of the infrastructure and then give it to the National Park Service. I could attempt that, I suppose. You know, I know they've made some improvements. There's been some roads built. But again, to come up with a plan and then somehow think the federal government's going to go by your plan, that's a waste of money. But we seem to love doing that anyways.
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure I'm doing my job. They give me all this money to do it. Any elected officials? You do. Okay, we'll take it.
I do have a question. I wrote it down and I didn't say it. I'm asking, we shouldn't be here tonight. I don't know why we're here tonight at all, because it wasn't long ago Lucas made the comment, the park proposal was off the table. So I don't know what happened between then and now, but the park proposal was off the table at one time, and it wasn't that long ago.
Okay, last call for elected, oh, you're an elected official. Sorry, I don't know the selectmen. I apologize. I don't know.
Thank you. Anita Mueller, Millinocket Town Councilor. Thanks, everybody, for coming out tonight. The thought occurred to me, and similar along the lines of Councilor Medora's comments, a lot of, in my mind, parallel universes going on here. And what a shame. With the condition our communities are in and the Katahdin region, the lack of jobs, 16% unemployment, 3 times the national average and state average, that we're not talking together. I appreciate you good folks coming tonight, but the reality is you're talking about a plan from 2011. And from what I'm looking at and the plan that I've endorsed is the plan that's evolved based on conversations with Lucas throughout the community. But I really think somehow we need to bridge this gap and come together, because I should have started counting earlier, but from the presentations, I heard you all pose over 100 questions that you didn't know the answers to. And there's a lot of questions out there, but somebody has to figure out how we're going to bridge this gap and move this community forward. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hang on. I don't know how many of you had the opportunity when the council, a few years ago, was invited to be up to the River Drivers restaurant to have dinner with Mrs. Quimby and a couple of mayors of towns that were gateway communities to national parks. Well, they did a beautiful presentation. It was a wonderful meal. We had some really good, stimulating conversation. And then it came down to ask the one thing that we needed to ask. Each mayor was asked, what do you have in your communities or the surrounding area for industry? The answer was simply none. What do you have that produces jobs other than tourism jobs? The answer was, from both mayors, and they were both very honest about it, none. Not one industry job, not one job that wasn't tied with the hotel, hospitality, tourism industry. Now, I know some of you were in that room with me, and I know some of you heard the conversation. So, my question is, if the national park is here before we get an opportunity to develop any type of industry or forest products, as has been brought up this evening, where are the jobs going to be? And when a 200,000 acre plus state park is able to run efficiently with 66 employees, where are 1,000 going to come from? That's my question, and that's another one that really needs a really specific answer. And like I say, look at these communities that are around these national parks, and look at how much industry is there. If it wasn't there before the park was set, the answer is zero. East Millinocket has an absolutely great site for economic development once that mill gets torn down. Millinocket's the same with what we have. If that national park goes in first, they will never be developed, because who's going to go ahead and throw that kind of money in to go ahead and take the actual chance that they aren't going to be able to operate, or the cost of their operation is going to be so high that they're never going to be able to do it. And I'll let that go at that.
I was hoping that Peter Triandafilo from Hubert was going to be here tonight, because, you know, if anybody's heard, but Patrick and I were talking about this a minute ago, but there's one of the local contractors that supplies chips to the Old Town Mill is looking at putting in 2 debarking drums up on the Hubert Road. And back in 2011, one of the comments that the Maine Woods Coalition used from Peter was he was worried about being able to drive and extract fiber and get down the Hubert Road because of its location to the park. Maine has 1/3 of its exports are in the forest products industry, approximately $900 million a year. I think that's significant. It makes me mad when I hear from people there's no wood being taken out of the area. The forest products industry is dead. It's not. You go up, I've been going up, and I've talked to the Hubert chip plant and also Gardner. Just Gardner has between 150 trucks and 125 trucks a week, and he's looking to expand on that. That's not including all the other trucks coming out of there. So that's one thing we have to remember. We've got a mill in East Millinocket that's hopefully won't be torn down anytime soon, but it's what they're doing is they are taking out the paper machines and to repurpose the buildings is what we've been told what's going to happen. It's a great industrial site. I think it scares investors when they hear about a national park and the federal air quality standards. I guess that's it.
All right, we got a couple more minutes if anybody wants to participate.
I don't have a question, but I've had concerns about the whole thing. I'm speaking in the mic. Can you hear me now? I've had concerns about the whole situation since the land was bought, because it used to be permissive usage all year round, and now there's gates. You can't go there. The camps were torn down on the East Branch and burned, and I'm just upset with the whole situation. My kids were brought up there, and they were able to hunt and fish and snow sled, and that's just not happening now, and that's my concern. We want to be pro-industry and pro-recreation and promote the tourism. And how can you do that if you're not allowed to do these things that we're trying to promote? I'm just not for it, and you don't negotiate with the federal government. I'll tell you that right now. And you're dreaming if you think you will. That's all I got to say.
Okay. Sit down. Okay, again, we want to thank everyone for coming, let you speak. Could be the end.
Okay. Wayne Curlow, a resident of East Millinocket and co-owner of North Lake Gallery. I think it's great that wood's being shipped to Skowhegan, and things are happening in northern Maine. But I'm concerned about this community. We have a declining population. Can you propose an alternative plan that has a potential to draw new people to the area and keep our young people here? That's the first question. The second question is, the tax base of Millinocket, East Millinocket, is shrinking. And although we all would like an investment in manufacturing, the possibility seems remote. Do you have any ideas how to stabilize or even grow the tax base? Thank you.
Thank you. I can answer that. The fact is, I think it's going on here now since 1994, since Jim St. Pierre first talked about this wilderness being created and turned into a national park. This is all part of a forest campaign. They write books on this stuff. The first thing they do is they make sure all the talk, the political talk amongst town councilors, talk about town governments, deals with the national park. Nothing else comes to the surface. Now here we are, the Millinocket sits at the mouth of the Golden Road with access to 10 million acres of forest land. Nobody else has that. They don't have, the only place you can find that is in Alaska. This town of Millinocket sits here, and all we're talking about is a national park. We're not living in a vacuum. Industry, the rest of New England, most of the country recognizes this national park debate takes over the entire area. They don't let it stop spinning. We have done a study of sorts by collecting all the newspaper articles that went since 1994, and it comes out in a timed way to keep reminding the public that the national park is here, the national park is coming, the national park debate is here. Now the national park's not going to go away. That's obvious. They have money. They keep feeding it. The national park debate is wearing us down. The national park debate came to a head just this spring in the middle of the town council budgets coming to a head, the loss of millions of dollars of income. All this is meant to put pressure on you. The first slide on the projector you saw said, endless pressure, endlessly applied. That's how they win. They only have to win once. The town council just has to vote once to say, yes, Angus King, please build a national park here. We're willing to succumb. If they win once, we lose forever. The federal government takes over, and all your voices are silenced. There isn't any chance for anybody to answer anymore. So if you want something to happen for this area, all you really have to do is let the national park idea go away. The Wall Street Journal, people that pay attention will start saying, well, I guess the national park went away. We can think about investing in those 10 million acres at the end of the Golden Road. Until this national park debate goes away, we're going to keep having this debate. We're going to keep spinning, and we're going to get wore down. So my idea is, let the debate go away. Let other people notice that we have an economy we could build on. We have 10 million acres of woods we could harvest. But as long as that debate keeps spinning, who's going to invest here? I wouldn't. The national park hangs over your head like a dark cloud. Until you make it go away, this is what we're going to have. Endless debate. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Matt?
I have a quick my name is Matt Polstein. I own the New England Outdoor Center. I've been advocating for the park since it started to form the configuration it's in now. I was strongly opposed to the Restore proposal, and I would strongly oppose anything that looked like the Restore proposal if it ever came back to life. I would say to Andy, with all due respect, while I've been involved in this project for the last 4 or 5 years, and perhaps I'm a liar and I don't know it, I have never once heard of any connection of the current proposal to Restore, and I don't believe in any way that it is connected to Restore. I'm sorry. That is from my heart. It's from my...
I got 5 pages of documentation, historical.
Well, Andy, let me continue. Most of what I've seen tonight's been anecdotal, and I think a great example of that is this discussion about air quality. You were all given a document that purports to prove that the air quality issue is an issue, and yet, even with the highlighting in the document, it consistently and systematically leaves out one line that says land parks in existence on August 7th, on or before August 7th, 1977. That air quality language was put in place with the Clean Air Act to affect parks that were in existence on August 7th, 1977, and not new parks. And I have a legal brief right here that we've circulated to the town councils, to the selectmen, to anyone that wanted them for years. And yet, the people that oppose a park spin that in a way that is designed to create confusion about an issue that really has been resolved. Sadly, much of what we heard tonight was anecdotal and follows that same trend. I now have a question, and I'm going to pick on poor Bob Myers. Hi, Bob. My question is, you talked about loss of opportunity for snowmobiling, and in the 70,000, I groom land on the end of the park. I groom my Twin Pines Snowmobile Club, supported largely financially by my company in the town of Millinocket in the state of Maine, grooms about 110 miles of trail. And we groom actually in a piece of the park just along the corner of the proposed park area. We don't groom on the other side, which would be the proposed recreation area. But currently there are no existing snowmobile trails in the proposed park, except that little piece that we groom, which I believe would be provided deeded access in perpetuity. We heard about that before. I'm curious as to how many miles of deeded access there are outside of the proposed park and recreation area. And I'm curious as to what your thoughts are about the proposal to deed access, the guarantee of deeded access within the framework of the recreation area. To me, as a snowmobile, as a person whose winter business is 95% driven by snowmobiling, the access that we would be guaranteed through that corridor seems to be a real blessing. And I'm wondering why you see it a different way, or if you weren't aware of it.
No, I'm aware of it, and you know, deeded access is deeded access right now. Oh yeah, I can't stand in front of the microphone. Deeded access is deeded access right now. All that is erased as soon as the feds take over. I mean, there's also a 150-foot easement on both sides of the East Branch that's owned by the state of Maine. That disappears when the feds take control of that land. And as for your example, there is another place, and that's over around the Moosehead Lake area, where Plum Creek has deeded permanent easements for 75 miles of snowmobile trails as part of their concept plan for the Moosehead Lake region.
My understanding, and I don't want to put Lucas on the spot, but perhaps in time this can be answered. My understanding is that one of the characteristic differences of this park from some parks is that it's a gifted park. And when it's gifted to the federal government, it can be gifted with specific requirements or restrictions. The federal government doesn't have to take it, or they can take it subject to those restrictions. It's my understanding, as someone whose livelihood depends on snowmobiling, that the gifting of this park and recreation area will include protections for my industry. If I'm wrong in that, that certainly would be a major misunderstanding on my part, Bob, but I seriously don't believe I'm wrong, and I'm confident that the way this park is being proposed, those interests would be protected. That's something we can explore and get a definitive answer to. And I think our goal should always be, when we get together, to find questions that we're worried about and find ways to get definitive answers to them, so that collectively the wood products industry, snowmobilers, pedestrian recreationists can work together to forge a stronger economy for northern Maine, something I know you and the wood products industry are interested in just as I am.
No, I agree with that 100%, Matt, but you know, I look at what we've seen in the past. I mean, 1998, who here knows that we can snowmobile in Acadia National Park? Few people. It's nice. It's really nice. You can snowmobile in Acadia on any road that's open to motorized travel in the summertime that isn't plowed in the wintertime. So there's about, I don't know, 40, 50 miles or so that you can ride. You can ride the Park Loop Road and up Cadillac Mountain. It's really kind of nice. 1998, you're all done. What happened? We've never had problems there. Not a whole lot of people go there because it's kind of difficult to get there. It's not a real snowmobile-friendly area. They don't have any gas stations where you can pull a trailer in and things like that. But 1998, you're done. You call the superintendent. What's wrong? Executive order from the White House. Every national park, no more snowmobiling. What's wrong? I don't know. Sorry. We're done for 4 years until the executive order is reversed. That's what happens when the federal government comes in. Everything comes out of command and control.
I'm just going to say a few things. I think a little bit of my frustration, and I'm sure it's been the community as well, is there's just not been a lot of discussion about the potential of the forest industry in this region. And I think it's a great heritage. It's, I think you ought to be putting together more of a master plan for the region that incorporates all your priorities, but to make a decision about one thing that may preclude another, I think, is not the right way to go about it. But that's just an outsider looking in. I know every community has to struggle with that. But I think you need a comprehensive look at your region. You need to get a consultant that understands you or put a grassroots effort together to do that. But you got to have a plan, you got to have a vision. You've been through a lot, but it seems like you're ready for really organizing your thoughts and thinking about what you want your community to be. That's just an outsider looking in, but I think it's a bigger effort than just following one path right now.
Okay, 2 minutes.
I'll be very quick. And I thank you all for coming out this evening. It was great to hear all of your comments and concerns. And pardon me, I'm Lucas St. Clair. I am the president of Elliotsville Plantation. My mother is Roxanne Quimby, and our foundation is the landowners for the park in question. And I wanted to just briefly describe the way a national park becomes a national park, and then describe why I am so encouraged by this input and hopefully continued input from all of you and others. It takes an act of Congress to create a national park, and when that happens, there's authorizing language that's drafted that makes up the legislation. That legislation has to be endorsed and sponsored by our congressional delegation here in the state of Maine. We have 4 of them. It has to then pass through the Energy and Natural Resources Committee in the Senate and the Natural Resources Committee in the House. And then it has to go to both of those houses to the floor for a vote. And if voted in both houses, it goes to the president to be signed. And then it becomes a law. And in a democratic country in which we all live in, the most profound guarantee that we can have is a law created by our Congress. That's the way our country and democracy is founded and set up. And to create that authorizing language, we have an opportunity at this moment to all have input. And while Mr. Bisk described me saying that in 2011 the proposal is off the table, you are absolutely right. I did say that, and I meant it. A proposal was sent by my mother in May of 2011, much to Mr. Young referred to. It was sent to, yeah, I'd be happy to give them to any of you. They were sent to the Department of Interior as an option to create a national park and recreation area, and they promptly refused that and said, you know, there is not enough local support. This isn't a plan that's been thought through. There's no authorizing language. If you ever expect this to be a national park or a national park and recreation area, you have to do tremendous amounts of work to get that to happen. And so I said publicly at that point that the proposal is off the table. And what I did was I came here and spent the last 3 years working in the 9 communities around the proposed park. I've had thousands of conversations, many of them with people in this room, about what they would like to see for the region, how our land that we own could potentially affect the economy, the access for recreation, and for a strengthening and diversification of the economy in this region. And while the plan is not yet completed, and we're still accepting and very much open to input from all of you, it has come a long way. And I would love the opportunity to share that with all of you. I've requested it in the last few weeks because it's become much more clear how to make a national park, a national recreation area in this region that meets many of the concerns from all of you and some of the concerns that I heard from the audience tonight. And I would love the opportunity to both hear from all of you and to also talk to you about the proposal as it begins to shape up. So again, I have a profound sense of gratitude to all of you for coming out on this Thursday evening and sharing your thoughts with everyone. It means a tremendous amount to me to know that there is so much thought and pride in this community. It's remarkable, and I hope to hear from you all more in the future.
Lucas, I've got a question. On the east side of the East Branch, at this point, how much land does Elliottsville Plantation have for the recreation area?
About 25,000 acres.
You do realize there are landowners. A friend of mine owns 6,000 acres on both sides of the river, and her grandfather built the West Dome Bridge. Doesn't plan on selling her land. And when you talk about making entrances through other people's lands, and they don't want to sell the land, what are you going to, what do you propose to do with those situations?
We haven't worked on it.
There will be, you can answer, but then after that, it's done. Because I'm the queen, I can do that. This is not a back and forth, we're done.
Well, I want to point out that he's inaccurate in something he says on the creation of national.
Let him answer. Sorry, I've got to be fair.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
So I'd be happy, I mean, I hope this is not anticlimactic, but I would be happy to talk to you about where the entrances might be. You know, that is something that I'd love input from you. And if there are landowners in question.
The whole room, not just me.
Right, and like I said, I look forward to.
If you're telling people they can make the park, and make entrances in Millinocket, there are various landowners that might not want to sell their land. When you put this proposal in and you legislate this park, and you have parcels that aren't able to be bought, and you take them by eminent domain, that's a concern for me.
Yeah, land being taken by eminent domain is a huge concern of mine too, and it certainly wouldn't happen. But thanks again for your input, and I'm happy to talk to you more about it.
Thanks. Andy.
As far as national park status, the EPI website, up until it came down last year, did not actually call for national park status for its lands. It basically said, and I'm going to paraphrase this, with local citizens, recreationists, sportsmen, EPI has decided on federal protection for its lands. And there are a number of ways that that land could be sent to the federal government that would bypass Congress, that would bypass you people, and that's something that President Obama has used more than any other president, and that's to designate it as a national monument. National monument status bypasses this entire conversation, and it is a done deal. It's under the Antiquities Act, the land transfers, and so my question, Lucas, are you guys planning to use the Antiquities Act and National Monument status? I ask this because if you look at the Thoreau-Wabanaki Trail, the outline of that is pretty similar to the Restore Park. And the renaming of the landings along the East Branch, and there seems to be a concerted effort between the National Park Service with their Rivers and Trails Protection Group, is this Wabanaki Trail in Thoreau being used to give it historical precedence so that this could be put in as a national monument, bypassing everything?
I don't completely understand the question. Do you want to have a back and forth?
Okay, here's the deal. You can answer the question, and then that's it. Okay? Because we said we were going to be done, but it's not fair to not let you answer.
Right. So yeah, the 1906 Antiquities Act gave the President of the United States to use his executive authority to protect the antiquities of America. By no means has Barack Obama used it the most. Teddy Roosevelt, our great Republican conservationist, has used it 18 times to create national monuments. National monuments can be created within the National Park Service, the National Forest Service, on BLM land, and within Fish and Wildlife. So 2 different agencies and several different land management organizations within that. It is done by the stroke of a pen, and can be done. It does not give the government or the president the opportunity to take land that the federal government doesn't already own. So while they could use the Antiquities Act to create a national monument in Maine, the only thing it would do would be to create a boundary. It wouldn't be a national monument until they acquired land within it, and only land within it would actually be managed by the Park Service. So that is a reality, and it is used. Every single president has used it. President Bush actually used it more than President Obama even. So it is something that both parties use, and it's a powerful thing. But that's not our intention. Our intention is to create a national park legislatively, like I described earlier.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, now, go forth and prosper. Leonard Nimoy, what an awesome guy. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Please be happy to visit our Facebook page, like it, keep track of what's going on, and certainly get in touch with us. Thank you.